I'm Sari Cooper, a certified sex therapist and sex coach in New York City. I'll be your host to Sex Esteem, a new show where we will explore in all its expressions relationships and sex in the modern world. Tune in for fun-filled facts and entertaining tips to having a more pleasurable sex life. Welcome to another episode of Sex Esteem with Sari Cooper. Today, I'm so excited to interview a colleague, longtime colleague, Laurie Mintz. I'm going to give you a little brief bio before we kind of get into it. Dr. Laurie Mintz is an author, a therapist, a speaker, and emeritus professor whose life's work has been committed to helping people live more authentic, meaningful, joyful, and sexually satisfying lives. As an emeritus professor at the University of Florida, she still teaches the psychology of human sexuality to hundreds of undergraduate students each year. Dr. Mintz has published over 50 research articles in academic journals and 6 chapters in academic books, and she's received numerous professional and teaching awards. She's a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the author of 2 popular press books, both written with the aim of empowering women's sexuality, and both with published studies demonstrating that readers enhance their sexual functioning. So there's A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex, Reclaim Your Desire, and Reignite Your Relationship, which I have with plenty of
Lots of
notes
bookmarks.
here because I reviewed it for the ASEC newsletter many years ago when it came out, as well as Becoming Clitorate, Why Orgasm Equality Matters and How to Get It, which was the winner of the 2021 SASH Media Award and the 2019 Star Consumer Book Award. So as I said, she's a longtime ASEC colleague, and I'm so pleased to have you here to talk about your work and your journey.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and honored to be here. And yeah, we are longtime colleagues. I've known you a long time, so I'm really glad to be sitting down with you and having this conversation.
So what, I mean, do you have like a aha moment where you decided like, this is, I want to focus my work around sexuality? And if so, what do you call your aha moment?
Yeah, my aha moment was actually very personal, and you might remember, it's in the introduction to A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex. So I had been a licensed psychologist for I don't know, several years. And I was mostly focused on eating disorders, did research in that area, had a practice in that area. And then when I was under a lot of stress myself and a new mom of 2 young kids, like poof, my sex drive went away. Very common, as we now know, right? And I was like, what's happening to me? And I started talking to friends, and everyone said, me too, basically. And I thought, this is crazy. Like, something's happening. Why don't I know about it? Why didn't I learn about this in grad school? So I was a researcher, I was a professor, I knew how to do research, right? So I dove into the literature, this published studies, the clinical literature, and I literally discovered a whole field that I didn't know existed: sex therapy, women's sexuality. And I thought, well, if I don't know this as a psychologist, most lay people don't know this either. And that's when I thought, I'm going to like use everything in the scientific literature and write a book. And that's what I did. I wrote A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex, which then later I was like, oh my gosh, is this useful? And that's why, like, there are several studies on it showing it works. But that was my entry into the field, was my own personal issue. And then it grew from there because I found it so fascinating. And I learned something new every day because it's still a great field with so much left to learn. And, after I was sold, and then I also started talking to, more and more clients about it and taking more and more trainings. And before you knew it, like, that's all I do now. I live, breathe, eat, sexual wellness, sex therapy, sex medicine kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that, mine wasn't necessarily personal, it was more professional, but it was still this aha moment of why aren't they teaching this in grad school and post grad? Which is one of the missions I'm having right now, which is to train more therapists on how to talk about sexuality with their clients. But I think that it's a good segue because you were talking about a certain life stage, right? When women become mothers, when their bodies change due to hormonal changes. But now your work has sort of grown and you're looking at women actually at different life stages because we know it's a long road in our lives, and each stage has different implications for our hormone levels. So what is it that you're getting into these days that might be a little different than that sort of young mom, newly, delivered child stage?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and thanks for asking it. So after that, I mean, I'll say what came next and now what I'm doing, if that's okay. So what came next is I ended up teaching a large enrollment undergrad class at the University of Florida in human sexuality, which was, oh my gosh, like such a highlight of my career and so much fun. But it was through that class that I learned that college age women basically were having so many issues with orgasm and were so ignorant about their bodies and felt so broken. And that's when I went down the path of sort of writing about empowering women to orgasm, the orgasm gap, wrote Becoming Clitorid, have done a lot of work on that. And then recently I have two things. And again, one was born of personal experience that I've been working on, and the other I just finished working on, and I'm like, ah, exhausted. I wrote a third book, which will be out in June 27. I literally just turned it in, and it is probably every life stage. You know, it's called Pursue Your Pleasure. What a sex therapist wants every woman to know. And it encompasses basically hookups to hormones, to menopause, like, psychological, medical, anatomy. It's very broad. But the other thing I've been working on lately is also came from personal experience. A few years ago, I started taking an SSRI for my own anxiety. And it was great, really helped with my anxiety. Never felt better in terms of that. But immediately I understood what so many of my clients had experienced. Poof, my orgasm was gone. But I had been lucky enough to have been attending ISWISH conferences, the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, which is mostly medical, right? And so I took out my notes about how to treat orgasm issues and I rank ordered them from least to most invasive. I called one of my dearest friends in the world, who's a physician, sexual medicine physician, and I told her what was going on in my rank ordering and was I right? And she said yes. And she's prescribed me a topical sildenafil cream plus other vasodilators to put on my clitoris,
Right,
often referred to as scream cream.
right,
And my orgasm came back full force.
right.
And that really, it was, I have to say it was great, but it angered me because I know so many women on SSRIs who are told they just have to accept their lack of orgasm as a trade-off to not feeling anxious and depressed. So I set on a mission to let the women of the world know that this cream and other things exist. And I worked with my friend who's a sexual medicine physician and an online company called Mojo. And we now have it's called Regain Your Orgasm. And you can get a course that includes a lot of other scientific strategies for SSRI induced and menopause induced lack of orgasm and a prescription. You have to see it, go through the doctor route, but a prescription for this cream. And I created another online course with them for women who've not orgasmed. So I'm sort of all over the map, but mostly focused on everything about women broadly, including SSRI-induced sexual dysfunction.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're talking about this certain life stage because I think that I think it's every life stage, to be honest. And, when I ask I always say we're doing psychoeducation when we're sex therapists. And when I ask clients, why do you think you didn't know this information about your body, after I give them some information about orgasm, and stimulation and erotic thought, and they'll say, the patriarchy. I mean, so younger women, I think, kind of get the soup in which that we've all been swimming for so long. What kind of things do you feel have really zapped or robbed women of the empowerment and agency that they all need in order to regain or even enact their pleasure?
Yeah, I mean, I really, except for some rare medical issues, I have almost never ever seen a woman suffering with sexual issues for which culture didn't play a large part. I mean, like like it all starts with the lack of telling us we have a clitoris. I mean, yes, the penis is easier to find, if you will, for little boys, and they have to hold it to pee. But the visible prominence does not account for the cultural silence. Like, girls are not told that they have a clitoris. Even when they discover it, they're told it's a vagina. Like, so I think it starts with this cultural silence around our most erotic organ. And then it just gets bigger into slut shaming and, all these myths about sexuality and these misinformations. And then the other thing I think that's really like horrible is like we are told that first time penetrative sex should hurt and will hurt, which most, as you well know, most pain and bleeding isn't from the hymen, it's from not being aroused enough and vaginal tearing. And women are told pain is just part of sex, and it's not. It's not a normal part of sex. It's either because, a medical issue or a pelvic floor issue or an anxiety issue. And women, like so many women, think pain is to put up with to be a woman. And that's the one that's just really upsets me more than almost anything else.
Same, same. And it's actually one of the issues that came in the door when I became ASEX certified, I don't know, 16 years ago. And all these 20-year-old women would come in, having suffered for years and being told by gynecologists that everything looked just fine. And then when I said, it shouldn't hurt, and they asked me, like, you mean never? And I was like, no, it should never hurt. And if it does, you need to stop. And you have to figure out what's wrong, and you need to trust your body. And so much of the consequences of that pain, right, is also trauma. Right.
Yes.
Right.
And powering through. Like, I mean, pain is the body's signal that something is wrong and we should stop doing what we're doing, period. Like, that's such a simple definition of pain. But for women, they ignore or suppress the pain in service of their male partner because they think it's normal. I mean, I think that's like, yes, I'm very passionate about a lack of being taught about pleasure, but I think its evil sister is the expectation of pain.
Yeah. I'm glad you put it in that way. And for those people who have not yet heard about the orgasm gap, can you explain what that term actually means?
Yeah, so the orgasm gap is the consistent finding in the research literature over 30 years of research that when women and men, cisgender women and cisgender men, get it on, the women are having substantially fewer orgasms than the men. And this cuts across, it's worse in hookup sex, but it doesn't get all the way better in relationships. The most recent study, which was conducted with over 24,000 single individuals in the US, ranging in age from 18 to 90, showed a 22 to 32% orgasm gap between women and men, with women having substantially fewer orgasms than men. And people say, oh, it's our bodies. Women are difficult to make orgasm, all that. No, no, no. This is culture because three other gaps help explain that this is not our bodies. When alone, right? 94 to 95% of women orgasm easily and within minutes. Women have, and why? Because 99% touch themselves externally, either alone or coupled with penetration. When there's in hookups, there's way fewer orgasms than relationships. Why? There's more clitoral stimulation in relationships. And women who have sex with women have way more orgasms than women who have sex with men. Why? A big reason, more clitoral stimulation. So, this is cultural. The problem is the way we do heterosexual sex, not our bodies.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, one of the lessons we have to actually teach women is that they have to go back to the beginning, I think, and understand what it is that they like, just from themselves, right? And then how to then ask a partner. And I think that's that. So there's the original sort of sin of pain and also lack of expectation. But then the next one is then how do they feel asking for what they want? That's for their pleasure, right? That's the communication piece, which, as I work with individuals and couples, I really have to hone in on how to ask for what you need with the understanding that it's what you need. It may not feel good to the other person. It may not give them pleasure. Or if it does, great, but that's not the point. Right? Because there's the performative aspect that a lot of women report, which is I feel like I'm so focused on them watching me getting excited that I can't even stay in my own body. Right?
Yes, yes. So, and in fact, I mean, so much of this is also culture. Like there's so much research, right? That women, if they're asked if sex was good, they'll evaluate based on if their partner had a good time, not them. When women don't orgasm, they're more worried about how their partner felt. There's a whole thing about performing rather than being in one's body. So it's like at every stage and step, it was Connolly and Klein had that seminal paper when women have why women have worse sex. And they basically said that at every stage of our lives, there are cultural factors that shepherd us to have worse sex than men.
Now, let me ask you something, and I don't know if you've done a study or come across studies around that. Beyond the sort of statistic of a higher rate of achieving climax when doing what we call solo sex or self-pleasuring, but I do wonder if there's been any studies that you're aware of around women's reluctance to actually have self-pleasure.
Mhm.
Oh, what have you found there? Because I have come across it clinically.
Yeah, and I just reviewed some of these studies for my forthcoming book. And first of all, a lot women are given a lot of shameful messages around it. There's in the research, more than men are. But also, a lot of times self-pleasure is framed for women as something to reluctantly resort to if you don't have a partner, rather than something which we know from the research actually enhances sex, right? There's a competitive theory of self-pleasure and a complementary theory. The competitive theory says it competes with it. The complementary theory says it complements it. And that bears out more for women than for men, that the more we self-pleasure, the more and better sex we have. Although I don't know of a study on this one, but I've certainly talked to many women, and Rachel Bloom had a song about it in her show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I am not talking about called the buzzing from the bathroom. There is a phenomenon of secret self-pleasure after partner sex because women are not getting their needs met. So after their partner's done or asleep, they will go to the bathroom or finish themselves. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about self-pleasure outside the context of partner sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the what I've heard in clinical practice too from clients is um, a feeling of loneliness. And it's
Mhm.
to the research outcomes, which is the sense of like I'm a, deep down, if you dive deep after loneliness, it means, I must be such a loser if I have to resort to self-pleasuring. No one wants me, right? That's
Mm.
the imbued meaning that people associate, as opposed to, great, I have this body, I have these hands, or I have this great, new vibrator I want to check out. Um, good for me, go me, right?
Yes,
Always
exactly.
viewed as like not good enough, not attractive enough, the loser kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so true. So true. Like, yeah, this thing I have to do because I don't have another option. I'm a loser. Yeah. Instead of like, wow, this is this great thing I do for myself, you know? I have this one client who has a great sex life with a partner, and she has like a weekly date with herself. Like, and she lights candles, and she's like, I wish she could model that for so many women, that this is like this great thing she does with and by herself, for herself.
Right. I mean, I always think back on my interview with Betty Dodson, the late great Betty Dodson, who was a pioneer on women's self-pleasure, right? And who back in the 70s, was giving workshops to women. She wasn't a licensed therapist, so she didn't have the same kind of ethical guidelines that we have. And she, had these body sex workshops to teach women how to self-pleasure with a vibrator. And so, while that is inspirational, and she was inspirational, it also makes me quite angry and sad that we're how many years later, um, still having to teach, encourage, support women that this is something that is worth fighting for.
Yes. I would love to tell you two Betty Dodson stories if I might. But if I don't know if you know, but Betty still has some vintage videos on her website, which is run by Carlin Ross now. And there's three videos of her giving, she used to give, as you know, group and private lessons. And there's a video of her called Becoming Orgasmic Carol, and it's on the vintage video. You can get it for some money. I think it's pretty minimal. But anyway, it's like a 20-minute video of her teaching this young woman, Carol, who was a medical student, who still didn't know about her body, how to reach orgasm. And it was very graphic. I mean, it's arousing to watch, and it's also like very educational. And she tells her how beautiful her vulva is, and how to touch it, and use a vibrator. And I show it in my, like, I have a lot of, when I have my class, I have like a lot of warnings. Like, we're going to see like live videos. This is not a required class. You don't need to be in here. If you don't want this, leave now. If you continue to go in this class, this is what you're signing up for. Because I don't want to get sued like so many sex professors have. So I show the Betty Dodson video in my class, and then I do these anonymous polls. And one of the polls is like, how did this make you feel, basically?
Uh-huh.
And, many of the women say relief. It normalized how I touch myself. But a lot of the women say angry. It's just what you're saying, angry that I have to be in a college class my junior or senior year before someone teaches me this. Yeah,
Right. Angry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I also had a client years ago who I did all the things that are theoretically work, right, for teaching orgasm, that have always worked, and no medical underlying issue, and it just didn't work. And I just said to her, like, I've taken you as far as I can take you. I need you to go see. This was when Betty was still alive. I said, I need you she had enough money to do it. I said, I want you to go to Betty Dodson because Betty can do what I can't do.
Right.
Betty can watch you self-pleasure and figure out what's going on. And one of the most prized pictures I ever got is my client and Betty texting me a thumbs up together,
Right.
you know, because Betty could watch her. And I would have never been able to help this woman because Betty watched her and found out that at the moment of orgasm, she was so anxious,
That she
she'd
could.
tense up and hold her breath.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I could have never figured that out.
Yeah, I try to ask people a lot of physical questions, and the fact that I used to be a dancer and choreographer helps, I think, because I actually can describe positioning and pressure and rotation of hips. And but you're right, like there's sometimes only so far we can go, which is why it's helpful. Those workshops are still going on. They're just not in New York anymore.
Yeah,
Harlan's still running them. And also, I think sending them to pelvic floor physical therapists who
huge, huge.
and do the hands-on work and go, can you feel this? And a woman will say, no, what are you doing? And then there's like this pressure or numbness, and it's never been diagnosed, or a hypertonicity, right, where the internal muscles are like too tight that they never release.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like this client herself wasn't aware. So I couldn't, no matter what I questioned her, she wouldn't have, so it's like, so sometimes those adjunctive things, but pelvic floor, I'm just a huge fan of pelvic floor physical therapists and sexual medicine physicians because, and I don't know about you, Sari, but I can't tell you how many women have come to me after seeing multiple sex therapists and failing, and coming to me for the final answer, can I help? And the sex therapist did all the right things, but what they failed to do is refer them to medical treatment and physical and pelvic floor physical therapy. They failed to say, what's going on with you might be pelvic floor or medically related, not psychological.
Yeah, which is why, like, it should be the other way around, right? My model, is bio, psycho, social. I say spiritual, sexual, spiritual, but I start with the bio because I want to rule out anything that might be, impinging, or an injury, or labor induced. People get scar tissue after certain kinds of traumatic labor or prolonged labor. The pudendal nerve situation. Like there's so many other issues that I've also learned so much from my ISWISH colleagues, so I think that we are still at the kind of advent of a new age of sexual medicine for women and for men as well, but more for women, and with no new resources being attributed now to more research.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
What are some of the, using your term of gap, though, what do you think are still gaps that you find in your practice or in your research around women's access to pleasure? Aside from
Such
what
a
we
good
already
question.
talked
I
about.
think I think it's still cultural, like not being told about our bodies, not being encouraged. But I also think there's this other cultural thing of pleasure is frivolous.
Hmm. Say more.
Like, work, 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 achieve, do it all, and like that pleasure is this frivolous thing that comes last. I see that get in a lot of women's way.
Yeah. Well,
No time for pleasure, whether it's, exercise or sex or watching a movie or reading a book, like it comes last.
almost like an indulgence.
Yes, yes.
Right.
So I think that's like a gap. I don't know if that's a gap, but it's a like a lack. I still think the biggest one is that women are taught consciously and subconsciously that sex is for their partners, to please their partners, to that their role is to please their partners, not please themselves.
And the next question I want to ask you, because you still are teaching college students and have for so many years, um, we have to talk about the fact that there's social media in the digital age, in dating and in sex and mating, if that's what we're going to call it. I don't even know if it's mating, for Gen Zers. And what do you see in younger people that you didn't see, 15 years ago with millennials, or even longer ago with, Gen Xers?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I haven't taught in a couple of years because I became a grandma and put my focus there. I am going to go back again one more time. But what I was seeing was like sort of a repulsion of the marketplace mentality. Like, the dating apps is like really commodifying people. I'll go to this aisle because I don't have one on this aisle. And sort of just a like a rejection of that some um others sort of a rejection of hookup culture, others a feeling like it's so individual, others wanting to fit with hookup culture but not and feeling broken because they can't, so it's just still so many confusing messages about the right way to do things.
Yeah. And what do you also, I mean, I see more and more women, more women, I would say, identifying more as queer than
Oh,
in
yes.
the past. Um, and how do you think that fits in with the cultural sort of stereotypes and the heteronormativity that still exists?
Well, it's interesting. I think I see there's a more awareness and a more freedom to explore and a more rejection of patriarchy in that way. But what's really interesting, it was a study. This study blows my mind. So there's one study done of people who identify as queer and what happens when they get in bed in terms of the orgasm gap. And so you have to think, right? These are people who were brave enough, strong enough to reject heteronormativity and cisgender norms and say, I'm queer, or I was born with a vagina, but I don't identify as a woman. I was born with a penis and I identify as a woman, So they've already been so brave outside the bedroom, especially in today's political climate, to come out. What was shown is that once they got in bed, the orgasm gap still existed, not based on gender identity, but on anatomy, with the pleasure of the people of the penis, with the penises, no matter where their gender identity, still taking precedence. It's like that deep socialization came out in the bedroom. And then this was a quantitative and a qualitative study. And the qualitative interviews spoke exactly to that like when in our most intimate, vulnerable moments, we go back to these deep teachings about intercourse and the penis, everything revolving around that.
And who's entitled to pleasure?
Yes, precisely. Yes,
That
precisely.
study, I would love to get that copy of that. Yeah, right.
I will see if I can dig it up and send it to you. I
Yeah.
know it's in my files somewhere, which are kind of a mess right now, but I'll do my best.
So what do you think about one of the things I also look at is well, I hear so many, especially women, sort of tired of the apps, the dating apps, and the commodification you call it, and I call it like very transactional
Hmm. Hmm.
experiences with people who are lying and misinforming and misrepresenting themselves. Um, but I find that they don't have the skills to actually flirt in real life. And I wonder if that came up in any of your polls or surveys when you were still teaching.
It didn't, but I can imagine, yeah. Like what I did find was a sister to that. They didn't have the skills to have real conversations and conflict resolution.
Yeah,
And that the text, like they did it, but they were kind of disgusted by like having to have these conversations that should be in person on text. And also, I mean, now we're getting to a real cultural piece about ghosting too. Like being so easy to either say really bad things to someone that you'd never say in person, or to just cut someone off
right.
without explanation like that. So I didn't get into the flirting, but we did have a lot of conversations about the texting and the ghosting.
Yeah. Yeah. It really degrades a person's ability to trust in any relationship, because at any moment it could be cut off from beneath them, like just the rug pulled out from underneath them. So uh when you have that lack of trust or anxiety, we know that works against being relaxed enough to enjoy sex and to actually talk to your partner about what you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's kind of like this underlying thing that's happening in these kind of more casual sexual relationships, but even more so, like people ghost after going out for several months, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Like, yeah. I mean, people ghost friends too. I mean, it's just so rampant in our culture. Like I think we're all of the, and I might sound old fashioned or whatever, but like people are not taught how to be like I think it's the same with flirting. People are not taught how to be in person. And I think a lot of that's the COVID era
Hmm.
as well. Like the young people who kind of missed some opportunities there. But I also think it's like the quick technology, the texting, I mean, I text as much as anyone else, but some things are not a text conversation.
Right. Yeah. And it's not just etiquette, it's just being in the moment and being able to read someone emotionally. You need
Yes,
to have that kind of feedback loop to understand where to go in a relationship. In the
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So, you're doing some great work and exciting new ventures. That's so much fun to hear about it. Are there any other things that you feel like I missed that we should talk about?
Let's see. Um, Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, I mean, I think what I've already talked about, the two courses with Mojo, and especially the medical integration of the cream, and I think that and I think this is something I really want to bring to sex therapy, and I think you've already done this, but I want to amplify the voice of for sex therapists. Let's rule out the bio first, because I've seen a lot of women harmed by sex therapists who haven't done that. Not that they're bad, they just weren't taught that themselves. Here's another thing I would love to talk about, as long as we're talking about that. I mean, just for fun, like, and we were together at a recent sex therapy conference where this kind of came up a little bit, and I'd love to talk to you about it. When I go to ISWISH conferences, they say the treatment of choice for diminished desire, low desire, is counseling plus meds, be that Addy, Falesi, testosterone, off-label bupropion, whatever. And when I go to sex therapy conferences, I hear, don't give meds. Meds can't fix a broken relationship. And I've given a lot of thought, where do I land on this? And it didn't take that much thought, but like it's so interesting to go to, and I know you're one of the few sex therapists that does both, right? You go to both worlds. So have you seen, I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but you have a brilliant brain, and I'd love to pick it as well on this topic, disconnect, and what's your take on that?
Right. Well, so it's interesting because I feel like I want to undo the damage of not informing clients so that they have informed consent to figure out for themselves and make choices, because it's an informed decision. So I will talk to them about all the different tools in the toolkit, including hormonal, treatment, whether it's systemic or topical. I want them to know all of these things exist. And I want to inform them that, your erotic mind is so powerful and you probably haven't utilized it as much as you could. But we'll go and, check it out with the work that we're going to do. And so, like, I remember seeing this couple, this heterosexual couple, and the complaint, the main complaint was low desire. And so she started going down the reading rabbit hole of testosterone and getting so excited. She was a perimenopausal woman. And so I didn't see them for several weeks. And so when they got back on the Zoom and I said, "How's it going?" She goes, we're having the best sex of our lives." I'd already given them a lot of sort of exercises to practice around pleasure and everything. I said, "Oh, so did are you taking the testosterone?" Because it had been like 4 weeks. And she's like, "No." And this is a woman who was like, so like gung ho to try testosterone and felt like it was her right and everything. Like she was so excited about it and empowered. It wasn't the testosterone. She started watching erotica that really spoke to her, and she started asking her partner to slow down and to focus only on her for a session. Like it was really all of that. So where I stand here is um, I want people to be able to decide for themselves with as much information as I have. I'm going to share it with them, right? I'm just an educator as well as a therapist, and I can't tell you don't do this.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not my place. It's not my life. It's not my body. Here are the pros. Here are the cons. Here are some of the potential side effects. Um, you want to try one variable and see how it works so we can look at it in a scientific way? Let's do that. But I want them to be able to make that decision.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. And for me, it's pretty similar for me. Like, although I want to kind of differentiate menopause hormone treatment than treatment of for sexual problems. Like when it comes to women in going through menopause and having the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, I am a very big advocate. You need to see a menopause certified practitioner to treat GSM because it's a progressive disease. It's not going to get better, da 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 da. So setting that aside, like talking about like Addie, Valesi, testosterone, like the desire meds, like, it to me, it's so individually based. If a client comes in and it's so clear, I don't want sex because I hate my husband and I'm not attracted to him. Am I gonna say, gee, maybe you should take a shot and feel horny? Or I'm gonna address that, right? Versus someone who like loves their husband, just has no desire, and I do all the things you do, eroticism, like all of that. And for some, it's like, that's great. And for others, it's like, yeah, this is working, but I still really miss feeling horny. I'm like, well, there's meds for that, like here's the like so it's the same thing. It's assessing what's the cause and giving the all the options for all the causes, and I'm not going to withhold information, but I'm also not going to say to a woman who hates her husband, maybe you should just feel hornier. It's like it's so individually based, and I don't think that this idea that there's a right or wrong is like everybody should be have educated about all of the options and make choices for themselves.
Agreed. And I've had women who come in who go, um, they are like slowed to take the referral to the sexual medicine specialist I refer them to, because they're having menopausal or GSM symptoms. And they'll say, but I'm like, why do you think you haven't made an appointment yet? But what's the point? I don't want to have sex with him again, with my husband. And I have to reframe it to say, this is not about sex with your husband. This is about your health. Would you not go to your doctor if you feel like your diabetes is worsening? No, I'm hoping you would go and test your sugar levels and make sure you're on the right dosage. Well, your genitalia, your pelvic floor are, life and death kind of could be potential
Oh
life,
yeah.
right? We know that about too many infections and UTIs. So we want you to take care of yourself, and then you can decide what you want to do with that. If you don't want to have sex with your husband, we'll talk about it. But this is about your sexual health and your overall health, right? It's sort of like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I had when I'll be honest, when Addie first came out, I was quoted in a magazine publicly as kind of being against it, both because I read the clinical trial and I wasn't that impressed, right? But I've since changed my mind because I have a lot of clients who went on it and say it's life-saving. It's great, right? But a woman who read my book wrote me the nastiest email when I changed my opinion, and I was also quoted quite publicly, like, you of all people, like, why would you prescribe this pill? Why would you be about this pill that wants to make women horny so they have sex with bad husbands? And it was like, well, that's not what I said. What I said is if women want to feel horny and want to take this pill, that's their choice. It's for them, their choice to feel how they want to feel. It's not about their partner.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so Addie is now the name, or for the last many years, of a drug that was formerly called flibanserin. And there was a lot of actual disagreement in the sex therapy, sexual medicine world about this medication because of the research outcomes that seemed mild.
Yeah. Disappointing.
Yeah. But as we said, everybody and everybody is different in the way it responds to medication. And if that's something that works for somebody and it's part of
Yeah.
their treatment plan that they helps them, then why not? Right?
Right. Yeah, and you're probably aware, like in terms, and I'll self-disclose, like there's a global consensus paper that the global consensus on testosterone, that our testosterone starts decreasing at age 30, and that it pretty well tanks by the time we're in menopause. And the global consensus paper says that women should have their testosterone replaced to get back to pre-menopausal levels, which is like a tenth of the male dose. And it's not just for sex drive, it's for energy. It's for
Mental
other,
clarity.
pardon?
Oh, mental clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like we've kind of, it's almost like there's patriarchy even telling women, even sort of people who should know better, kind of saying this is what women should do is patriarchy instead of here's all the research. Let me present it to you. Let me tell you what the research says so you can decide for yourself what you want, you
Right.
know?
Right. Which, I think there are probably some women who are so not used to having choice. That I think for them to be given the decision-making power is so brand new that it's maybe frightening in some ways or anxiety for you. Like, well, what would you do? Well, what should I do? Right? This whole
Right.
tell me what to do. And to say, like, I can't tell you what to do. Here are some of the outcomes. Um, we don't know how your body will respond. It's something you could try. You could talk to your doctor. Um, right.
Yeah.
But
But
that
I think it should
opening
be,
of choice, right?
but I think it should be approached the same way we approach kink or the same way we approach, different sex
Consensual
acts.
non-monogamy or
Yeah, exactly. Or the same way we approach, different sex acts, sexual non-monogamy, kink. Like, here's what the research shows. Here's what the choices are. What do you think works or doesn't work for you or erotica? Some of my clients like, oh my gosh, when I suggest that it is a scientifically supported modality for arousal, some are like, yes, thank you. This helps me feel good about what I'm doing. Others are like, ew, disgusting. But, my job isn't to decide for people, it's to tell them what the research and because some things aren't researched, right? So
yes,
what is my research and what is my clinical wisdom and experience?
right, right. And give them options.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this was such a delight. I'm glad we finally got
I am
our
so glad we
calendars
finally
aligned.
did. Yes. Thank you for including me in your wonderful series and interviewing me. And I know it took quite a while for us to schedule this, but I'm so, so glad we did.
And we'll add all the details of your upcoming or your past books and upcoming courses, actually.
Yeah, I can send you the links for those courses if I haven't already.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay.